I just got out of the gym, so if I'm covered in chalk, it is what it is. But I felt like I had to sit down and talk about Ray Vaughn's new project, The Good, the Bad, Dollar Menu, because I listened to it the second half of my workout in the gym. It's not exactly gym music, but its content is even less gym music, and it can still work in there. And I think there's a reason for that I want to discuss. Now, there's something about honesty and vulnerability in hip hop that I find invigorating, particularly as a 50-year-old who loves this culture but is not of this culture. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I wasn't sure as I got older that I'd be able to relate to hip hop. I discovered hip hop in 1984. By 1985, I was all in, like Fat Boys Are Back and LL Cool J's Radio. Both came out in 1985. Those were both huge songs, projects for me. Some of my earliest hip hop memories are dancing in my bedroom to LL Cool J's Radio by myself. I thought I was LL Cool J. And of course, LL had I Need Love, which was its own form of vulnerable back then. But New York hip hop took over in the early 90s, and I loved it, still love it, but it wasn't exactly vulnerable. There were moments of it, sure. Meth and Mary maybe has some vulnerability there. There are certainly examples. Ice-T came in, sounded more New York to me, but was from the West Coast, more conscious. I liked the conscious aspect of I'm Your Pusher and Colors, but it still wasn't vulnerable. There was still a hardcore, macho sort of attitude to it. And I, no, I'm not blaming anybody for that. There's room for that, and that's how men learn to be men for most of our lives. And then, of course, I got more into West Coast music through Too Short and then NWA. I think it went in that order, had to have gone in that order. Too Short, NWA, no vulnerability, but it was different. And it gave me a new appreciation for these new sounds that I was getting. And when hip hop did eventually become more vulnerable with, say, 808s and Heartbreaks or Man on the Moon, it kind of went all the way sad. Same with underground hip hop, Atmosphere. Certainly vulnerable, still with the macho sort of vulnerability in it, but also sad. More emo. And, I connected with that at times. I loved 808s and Heartbreak. I loved Man on the Moon. Not saying those were bad things at all. But as a 50-year-old now, the question is, can I relate to new hip-hop? We've had things like 444. We've had Kendrick's Mr. Morale. Mr. Morale especially is a hard listen. It's a tough album to sit with. It's a tough album to play repeatedly. It's a great album. It's an incredible project. And I will always appreciate the depth that Kendrick brings to his music, the layers and the coding, incredible. And that's what I go back to something like Mr. Morale for. Dissect Podcast right now is going through Mr. Morale, and I'm loving re-listening to the album through that lens. But it's not a project I'm going to return to. Ray Vaughn's new album, I'm going to call it an album instead of a mixtape, I've returned to more times this weekend. Just came out on Friday, Saturday night. I've returned to it more times. I've listened to it all the way through more times than I have Mr. Morale. Not because it's a better album per se. Not saying that. I'm not comparing the two, really. I think the two are in a similar bracket in terms of what they're saying, what they're doing. But what Vaughn has done is create a modern hip hop album that speaks to the street culture that he's lived. It speaks to the real human problems that we all experience. And it does it in a way that doesn't make for a hard listen. In fact, it makes me want to come back to it. There is joy in his pain. It's a callback to another 80s Rob Bass, DJ Easy Rock, 88 maybe. There's joy in Vaughn's struggle. And that's why you can play it in the gym. It's not a gym album. Don't go play it in the gym. That's not what I'm saying it's for. But there's an emotional maturity that allows him to talk on his struggles and talk on them in a way, in a voice, with a delivery that doesn't sound like he's just saying the lyrics, but with his normal macho rap voice. I think maybe that's the trouble with hip hop for a long time, was that the voice, I couldn't hear the pain in the voice all the time. Certainly there are examples of that. But when they went to pain, they stayed there. They lived there. They were soaking in it. Vaughn's not doing that. I find The Good, the Bad, the Dollar Menu more relatable, more palatable than a Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, which I think is a really high-level example of speaking on the trauma of relationships and growing up Black, how Kendrick grew up. It's speaking on a lot of things I don't understand, but it also speaks to a lot of things I do. But it's doing it at a very high level. Vaughn's doing it on a very human level. That's something I feel is an evolution. If we look at something like Star Wars, people ask George Lucas why, when you go back to what would have been the very first episode, is everything more grand? The original, which was number 4, was far more simple. The buildings were more simple. The clothing was more simple. It was more grand back then. And he said, well, look at history. That's the way things have been done. There are these big, grand displays, and we've eventually simplified. And I think a lot of the time that's what evolution does. And the evolution of hip-hop has gone through these phases of big, grand hip-hop. Again, not bad. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, huge, massive songs, massive production, and brilliant. Mr. Morale, heavily coded, lots and lots of layers, lots of hidden meanings, very complex, brilliant. Vaughn, Good, the Bad, the Dollar Menu, simple, relatable, brilliant. I think there's a certain level of evolution there. And I think using the dollar menu and using fast food is such a smart way to approach it. If you're talking to the people who need the message the most, they're going to understand the simpler things first. I'm going to understand the dollar menu way before I understand you telling me about luxury dinners. And I think most of the people who need that message will understand it the same way. And we know that Ray Vaughn has bars. I've heard his LA Leakers freestyle. I found him through Crash Out Heritage and Impossible Patty. So he's got bars, but he doesn't feel like he has to layer everything so densely here that we can't understand it, because pain is universal. We're all going to go through something. And there's so much that I personally feel like I can relate to Ray Vaughn with. Two daughters, the struggles with the way he grew up and still trying to do his best. Grew up in Long Beach, valedictorian of high school, went to 7 different schools throughout his life. And then I heard in a Bootleg Kev podcast that his second daughter, when she was born, the baby's mother died in childbirth, the mother of his first daughter as well. And that's a terrible thing to have to go through. And it's a massive responsibility. And the weight that he's carrying around with the responsibility of these 2 girls is huge. And he's still able to give us this kind of music. And I appreciate that so much. Hearing this level of emotional intelligence and vulnerability and references to just acting a fool and doing things the wrong way and making mistakes and regretting it and all of the things that we deal with on a daily basis, hearing that from a young rapper fills me with hope. Not only for him, for his daughters, but for hip hop in general. I know a lot of people hold 444 up as kind of the changing, the first of a new thing. I think we can draw direct lines back to the, like I already have, the I Need Love, the Rob Bass Joy and Pain, the 808s and Heartbreak and Man on the Moon, to Jay-Z's 444, to Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, and to The Good, the Bad, and the Dollar Menu. I think there's a direct line through all of those. And I think that The Good, the Bad, the Dollar Menu is just as good as all of those. This is trauma without having to be traumatized. You can experience trauma and not let it control you. That's what Ray Vaughn's doing here. This is a clear message that's easy to digest. And not only is it easy to digest, it's easy to get. You can drive up to that fast food window. You can order that chili dog with no jalapenos, as he says. Easy. You can do it every day. You can order off of that dollar menu. It doesn't cost much. It doesn't cost you much to listen to this dollar menu. And I think this dollar menu, like he says, the dollar menu saved his life. I think this dollar menu has the same power to save lives because of the strength of the message and how easy it is to consume. Incredible work by Ray Vaughn. I'm looking forward to whatever else he has got coming. Unbelievable that the TDE camp just keeps doing what they do. And if you haven't listened to this project, go listen.